All right, get it. Actually, you know what? Let's give ourselves a round of applause. It has been 2+ years since we have enjoyed each other's physical company, you know, and I really enjoyed seeing the faces of people when they were eating. We have food here for people who are so sorry about that. And even faces behind masks. It is just such great to touch people, shake hands, and all of that. But welcome to our April meeting on the Legislative Project, our community meeting, as we would like to call it. And we have a special guest, Jeffery Robinson, who I know many of you are eager to hear from. But first, welcome. We will start with our typical 3 minutes of meditation to center ourselves, to think about why we're here, to think about what this organization has done, how far we've come, and how far we have yet to go. And I will keep time and meditate in your own place, commune with whomever you would like to commune with, and I will let you know when it's up. All right. Thank you once again for coming. Hey guys. A few housekeeping notes. As you can see, we have people coming in. For those who need it, first of all, we are very, very happy to be here at the Bar's house. The campus of the University of Memphis. We thank them so much for being our host for this evening and for more evenings to come. So anyone who needs to use the bathroom, just right out the door, go past the food and then make a left, and then they have 4 bathrooms available. We have bottled water outside that is, and of course there are boxes of food for those who just came in. If you want a box, a turkey sandwich or a veggie sandwich, it's right outside, okay? For those who are virtual, if you have a question for our speaker, we are asking that you submit it via the chat. Jessica, is that right? And I can monitor it.
Yeah.
And you can ask it during the session during the Q&A. And for those who are in the room, the speaker should be able to hear you, but we do ask that you project to get your question answered. Okay. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Attorney Jeffery Robinson. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining us here. I think many of us have seen the film, The Who We Are, and some have even listened to you on YouTube on the Who We Are project, and we are familiar with your work. And hopefully those who are maybe virtual are familiar with your work, and if not, they will become more familiar with your work. So I'm going to hand it over to you to kick us off, and we'll get to some questions in a bit, okay?
Well, number one, thank you, everybody, for not only coming out tonight. I wish I could be there with you in Memphis, but thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we're just trying to center you on the screen.
Thank you, everybody, for your involvement in this organization and the work that you are doing, because it's critically important. And I'm constantly saying to people, if you think one organization somewhere in the country is going to solve everything, you're just out of your mind. It's going to take a coalition of people working together. So thank you very much. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes and show you all a short, I guess, what do they call it? A teaser to the film. If you haven't seen the film, Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America, it was released in theaters in January and has played on about 350 screens across the country in different cities across the country. And at the end of March, it was just released for, I'm learning all these new terms, video on demand. So like on iTunes and Apple and DVD and Blu-ray, and it's going to be streaming on Netflix very soon. We have a specific date in mind, but I don't know that for certain yet. So, I'm going to show you a quick trailer of the film in case you haven't seen it. And then if there are questions, I'd love to take them. And if not, I can tell you just a little bit more and we'll just kick this off. So this is going to start pretty suddenly. So if y'all are ready, here we go.
If you have ever owned a slave, please raise your hand. Slavery is not our fault. We didn't do it. We didn't cause it, but it is our shared history.
Slavery had nothing to do with the war.
And so if I make the statement to you, America was founded on white supremacy.
Lynchings or hangings took place here.
It's a genocide, it's an ethnic cleansing.
The bodies were dumped all the way where the underpass is, and they intentionally put the interstate on top of their bodies.
It's ingrained in my memory. I'm just looking at him in the ditch with his eyes open.
My daddy sat on the carport right here in a lawn chair with a shotgun across his lap because he was going to be ready if somebody came to the house.
There must be a revolution of values in our country.
I cannot look at that video in its entirety.
And my brother did not deserve to die unarmed with his hands in the air.
It will never get easier to have an honest discussion about race in America than it is right now. Because if we wait, it is only going to get harder.
So that is the trailer to the film that I made with Sarah Kunstler and Emily Kunstler, two filmmakers. that I met by coincidence. And so some would say that this thing was meant to happen. But the movie is essentially my attempt to understand information that I started learning in my 50s. I have had one of the best educations in America. I went to Christian Brothers High School in Memphis. I went to St. Louis Grade School in Memphis. I went to Marquette University, and I went to Harvard Law School. I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1956. So for all of y'all there who are about my age, we didn't grow up reading about the civil rights movement. It was happening when we walked out of our homes. And yet there was all this information that I didn't know, that I was finding out. And I was trained, I spent almost 40 years as a criminal defense lawyer, a trial lawyer. And I was always trained, when you have a complicated set of facts, put them in a timeline just to see what happens. And when I did that, my head got blown open. And I was angry at myself for not knowing some of this information. Then I was angry at my teachers because I figured I'll blame them because I needed somebody to blame. But then I thought, if my teachers weren't taught this information, how are they going to share it with me? And so I just kept digging, and I started giving presentations around the country. And in April of 2017, I gave a presentation in a federal courthouse in New York, and Sarah Kunstler, the daughter of the famous civil rights lawyer William Kunstler, was in the room. She's a criminal defense lawyer, and she heard it. And she and her sister Emily contacted me and said, you know, we're filmmakers. We want to make a movie. This presentation is really important. And I laughed at them. And we figured out that we met on June 20th, 2017. And on June 19th, on Juneteenth, 2018, we were in front of a packed house in Town Hall Theater in New York City with 7 cameras. And we started filming the presentation, and then we went around the country, and that's how we made the film. So my connection with the Kunstler sisters was coincidental, but really, really significant. And I'm very proud of this work. And it's the first thing that the Who We Are project is doing. And if there's a 1-sentence explanation of what we're about, it is making sure that all of us are aware of the truth about our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that when we make decisions about why America looks like it does today, we're making those decisions informed by what actually happened to bring us to today, not a myth about what happened or a narrative about what happened that leaves out critical information. So I left my job. I was a criminal defense lawyer for almost 40 years. And then I went to the ACLU, their national legal office, and I was a deputy legal director for 6 years. And I left that job in March of last year to form the Who We Are project, because I really think that, especially right now, the importance of understanding our history is critical. So let me shut up for a minute, and I don't know if there are any questions, but I'd be happy to take any if there are.
Sure, Jeffrey, thanks for that. I have a couple of questions, and then others, if they have questions brewing, I'm sure they will open up the floor. You mentioned, well, a couple of things I have to ask you about, but you mentioned that the sisters, the Kunstler sisters, saw you give a presentation and they approached you. What came before that? What lit that fire in you to start this journey of doing this research?
In 2011, my sister-in-law was living in New York City with her mother, and they were raising our nephew, Matt, who was at that time 12 years old. And my sister-in-law had MS, and she started to deteriorate. It was clear she was going to pass away. And she did pass away in April of that year. And then her mother passed away in November. So the two people that were raising Matthew both died. So Matt moved from New York to Seattle, where my wife and I live, and our nephew became our son. And I was terrified because we didn't have children before that. And this 13-year-old is now looking at me and I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do? And I went looking for help. I was trying to read stuff about how you raise a kid, and especially a young Black kid, because I had been a criminal defense lawyer for more than 3 decades, and stuff that I saw day in and day out in my practice. And that was personal to me because it was impacting people that I got to know closely and that I represented. But it's a little more personal when it's your child. And when I found myself talking to him about how you survive encounters with police, I found myself saying to him the same thing my father said to me in the 60s. And when my father said it to me in the 60s, he told me it was the same thing that his father told him in the 30s. And that just shook me. And as I said, I was reading, looking for help on how to raise this young man, but I was looking for that. But what I found as I started reading were all of these facts about our history, United States history, and its colonial and constitutional form, facts about our reliance on anti-Black racism that I had never heard before. It's why this film is called A Chronicle of Racism, not The Chronicle of Racism, because The Chronicle, this film is 2 hours long and it would take a lot longer than that. This is just focused on the experience of Black Americans, because I felt like I had some agency to talk about that because of who I am and where, where I grew up. And so that's what the film is about. And I started the research in 2011. So I had been finding this stuff and putting it into presentation form, and I would find more. And I've been giving presentations for almost 5 years by the time I met the counselors. It was just, my wife jokes now and says it was your side second job, because I would fly somewhere and give a presentation and meet people and then come back to my job at the ACLU or come back to my job at my law firm when I was doing it then. So I just felt like I had to share this information that I was finding because I knew how it impacted me. And I felt like if other people knew this stuff, it would have an impact on the way they see the world.
I have one more question for you, then we'll open up the questions here live and then virtually. You mentioned earlier in your opening, you're an attorney, you have something complex, you start with the timeline. You may be familiar with Ibram X. Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, which in a lot of ways is essentially that. It starts with the seeds of this anti-Black racism. What are your thoughts on that work?
Well, Professor Kendi is brilliant, and Stamped from the Beginning is only the first thing, or one of the first things that he wrote and had published. He has published more since then. And the difference between Professor Kendi's work and this film and the work of the Who We Are Project, at least in that book, is that what Professor Kendi did is to go to look at the philosophical and political justifications that individuals who were influential in societies would use to describe their anti-Black racism and their embrace of this myth of white supremacy. And so these people were making these kind of arguments at some point. And then those arguments morphed because of social impact of different things happening in the world. And the arguments changed a little bit. But what Professor Kendi shows is that there is a common thread to all of those philosophical and political justifications. And that's why I think his work was so brilliant, because he was tying in things at, a level much above my pay grade. I've got a law degree, but Professor Kendi is, he is a scholar. What I was doing was slightly different. And I don't want to say lower because all of this work is important, but it was at a different level. What I wanted to do is just, one thing I learned as a trial lawyer is, if I tell you that this guy hit this other guy with a devastating blow, now you have to figure out, what does devastating mean? Is he exaggerating or is he under exaggerating? And what I found is, if you say he hit him in the face, his nose broke, he bled for 35 minutes and he was unconscious, that's a lot more powerful than telling somebody what it means. And so what I tried to do is to say, this isn't about theory, this isn't about anything. I wanted to know what the people who founded this country thought about this myth of white supremacy, and what they thought about the people that were kidnapped and brought here from Africa. And there's an amazing thing about human beings, literally since before there was written language, going back to cave drawings in France. They're 20,000 years older than the first use of written language. And what these things are doing is people are describing the world around them. When human beings think we're doing something important, we write stuff down. There are letters written by every founding person who was involved in creating this country, because Al Gore hadn't created the internet yet. So people had to use letters, and they wrote down what they were thinking. And as I was going and looking at these letters, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I was never taught this. This can't be true. But every state in the country has a historical society. And so just a quick example, when I heard the third verse of the national anthem, I didn't believe it. I thought that someone is making this up, until I went and saw the handwritten document in Francis Scott Key's handwriting with the words to the third verse in the national anthem that are, well, they are what they are. No refuge can save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. So what I wanted to do is to say, I just want to show you the facts of what people said and what people did. And if we all look at that together, we can then talk about it in a way that makes sense. And when we start asking ourselves, why does America look like it does today? And I'm talking about the gaps between white America and Black America at virtually every socioeconomic marker you can think of. Why does that exist? There are all kinds of answers to that problem, but to the extent that people are looking back on a past that has been warped by narrative into something that wasn't true, then we will never come up with answers that will work. You can't solve a problem if you don't admit what the cause of the problem is. So I feel like this is just a critical time to start telling the truth about our history. And that's what this film was about.
I think they have some questions for Dr. Please.
Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, I'm Mark Fleischer from Storyboard Memphis. I got to interview you back in February.
Yes.
So sorry that I missed you when you were here. I really wanted to meet you in person, but thank you for this presentation this evening. One of my favorite, and also something that sticks with me in the film and something you say, is that this country is a great country. This country was founded on white supremacy. Those two statements are not mutually exclusive. And that really sticks with me because that really gets to the heart of your approach and the discussions and the challenges we face. Can you elaborate on some of the items in the Constitution that you uncovered through your research?
Well, and let me just say that, number one, thank you very much for your support. I really do appreciate it. And I wish I did get to meet you in person. The statement is something that every single person on this call knows to be true. Every one of us at some point in our lives has behaved as a saint. And at other points in our lives, we behaved as a sinner. And that's because people aren't just one thing. And if people aren't just one thing, then countries aren't just one thing, because they're made up of people. So countries have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And anybody that says America isn't a great country, it's like you need to take the blinders off, because America has demonstrated its greatness again and again and again. Yet America is also an incredibly racist country. And so going back to what the founding fathers did, we all heard about the 3/5 clause in the Constitution. And I always thought that was just an expression that Black people were not seen as complete human beings. Oh no, it was much more than that. The 3/5 clause was all about the Electoral College, because as Patrick Henry wrote in one of his early letters, there were 236,000 Blacks in Virginia and few or none in the northern states. 236,000 times 3/5 still gives you a lot of votes in terms of how many people you get in Congress and how many electoral votes you get in the Electoral College. The Electoral College, which was formed in the Constitution, was created to give the southern states not a guarantee that they could elect a president, but a guarantee that they would have a significant voice in who was president. And if you wonder if it worked, out of the first 12 presidents of the United States, 9 of them were from the South and 7 from Virginia. The Constitution went on. In Article 1, Section 9, I believe it was, they said, look, we are importing kidnapped Africans in the transatlantic slave trade. It is bringing incredible wealth to our country, and we need to keep doing it. So they passed a law saying that no state could prohibit that trade until 1808. And as they went on and thought about it, they said, okay, that's great, but what if somebody tries to amend the Constitution and get rid of that provision? So they put in an extra provision that says you can't amend the provision about keeping the slave trade open until 1808. You can't amend that until 1808. They actually doubled down on it to demonstrate just how significantly important it was. And I think the thing that really got to me was Article 4 of the Constitution, which made any attempt by a Black person to be free literally unconstitutional and illegal. And this was the document that founded our country. And so there are some people that say, oh, well, the Constitution was just a compromise between those who wanted slavery and those who didn't want slavery. And my question is always, man, if that's a compromise, somebody did not do a good job cutting that deal. Because if they wanted more than what they got in the Constitution, I don't know what more that could have been. So I never knew those details. And when I was at Harvard Law School, I never got taught those details and what was behind some of those provisions in the Constitution until I went and started looking. And when I started looking, I was, it really impacted me.
We did have some questions virtually, but you actually you answered them as you were speaking. So do you have another question here live? Oh, Randy, go ahead.
I ain't gonna take too long though. Mr. Jeffrey, I heard about you because I've seen the movie. And but my 2 questions I have is, when did you first hear about lynching? And the second question is, what do you think about the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act? No, just fast.
Like anybody that in our community that grew up in Memphis, I heard stories about lynchings when I was a kid, but they were these individual things that happened. I had no idea how systemic it was until I was literally in my 50s. And I started reading things about, well, the Brian Stevenson's organization has documented over 4,000 lynchings between 1877 and 1950. That's a lynching every week on average. And those numbers were just crushing to me. And so what I will say about the anti-lynching law that was just passed is that it took, the thing that I think is significant is that it took 100 years to get that law passed. And I applaud it. It is a very important symbolic issue and a symbolic step in our laws, just to acknowledge that that kind of behavior is deplorable. But the thing I'll say about that law is it did not make illegal anything that wasn't already illegal. And so if I take somebody and lynch them in any city in America without that anti-lynching law, I've committed a homicide under state law, and I've committed a violation of federal civil rights law under federal law. So the anti-lynching bill didn't make anything illegal that wasn't already illegal. And while I think it's important, I think that substantive solutions are more important. And I'll give you one quick example. Congress voted to make Juneteenth a holiday. It takes, I think, and I did the research on this, $450 million to shut down the federal government for one day. So what Congress did in the matter of about 18 days, because all of this started after the flurry of publicity last year at the 100th marking of the Tulsa massacre, when all of these things were going on and people were talking about the upcoming Juneteenth holiday. And in less than 3 weeks, Congress got together, Congress and the Senate, and they passed the law saying Juneteenth is a holiday. They are willing to spend $4.5 billion over the next 10 years to have a federal holiday, but they're afraid to talk about a reparations bill. So my point being that there are symbolic things in the law because the law often works as a symbolic thing about what we're trying to reach. And so I don't want to downplay any of it, but I do want to say that holidays and laws like the anti-lynching bill will not stop violence against us, and they won't get substantive changes in what we need to do as a country.
Oh, Pam.
Thanks so much for taking this time, Mr. Robinson. With the Convention of States.
And for, oh, go ahead. I was going to repeat the question because some people online are having problems hearing the ones in the audience. So I'll repeat the question. You just go ahead and ask. Yes.
Are you familiar with the Convention of States? And to my knowledge, almost half of our states now have passed the Convention of States to call a constitutional convention. They need a certain number of states to do this, to call a constitutional convention in the United States to change the Constitution.
So Pan asked.
And this is undergoing every day. Big victory recently in Wisconsin, another victory in South Carolina, etc.
Pan asked about the Convention of States, basically the states getting together to call a constitutional Congress to revisit the Constitution.
I have heard a little bit about it, but if it happens, it happens. I doubt very seriously that it will, because amending the Constitution is no small thing. And so I doubt very, very seriously that that will happen. But if it does, then we'll see. And You know, my feeling is I say in the movie that we are at a tipping point in American history. And the movie was filmed, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to, the producers would say, don't give this away, but the movie was filmed on Juneteenth, 2018. And many people say, well, it looks like you filmed it like 3 days ago. Tipping points in the history of a country that's 400 years old don't last for a minute or a month or an event. They last for as long as a decade. We are at a tipping point. There is no question about it, because we are confronting and talking about issues of race in America in ways that we haven't before. I'm not saying the conversations haven't gone on, but the conversations haven't been this widespread. We didn't have the ability to have half of America watch George Floyd die in color live on the internet. Those kind of things make the time we're living in different. And so we are at a very, very important point. And what I say to people is, if you're looking around and seeing like some chaos and some disturbing behavior, if America was truly getting ready to make a different road toward racial justice, a substantive road toward racial justice, how do you think the people that don't want that to happen would behave? It would look exactly like it does. You would see behavior like January 6th. You would see people yelling and screaming in school board meetings, don't teach my children our history. And, you know, don't get me started on this whole CRT thing, because that's just like a bugaboo. It's a distraction. If you see this film has nothing to do with critical race theory. This film is about what Americans said and what they did. And I think you call that history. So we're living at, I think, a critically important time. And the interesting thing is, this time, we're not going to be able to put it on our parents or our grandparents or anybody else. We're going to find out just where America stands. And I look forward to that, because I think there is a very loud minority that wants America to go someplace that has little to do with racial justice. And we're going to figure that out.
I'm gonna go, Phyllis Luco in the back. Attorney Luco.
Hi, Attorney Robinson. I'm Phyllis Luco. I'm Shelby County's Chief Public Defender. And a few years ago, I led the community's efforts to get a sign commemorating the victims of 1866 Memphis Massacre. And what I learned during that process, that there was a lot of pushback from other places in the state, as well as some pushback here locally, to actually commemorating the victims of the 1866 Memphis Massacre and linking it to the decision by Congress to finally approve the language of the 14th Amendment and send it to the states for ratification. So I found that pushback, and what I see now is the pushback that you just alluded to, where states are passing laws, calling it critical race theory laws, but really it's an attempt to intimidate educators from teaching the very history that I wish I had learned when I was in American history here in Whitehaven High School here in Memphis. So I'm wondering, do you have suggestions for educators and for other people in the community who would really like to do our part, but we are really hampered by laws that intend to prevent us from using certain government funding to educate people, and certainly laws that are really intimidating our educators from broaching these subjects in class.
For those online, in summary, what do you suggest educators do to continue teaching this history?
Number one, Thank you for that question. And I think educators all over the country are struggling with this. I know that there is a program at White Station High School that's going on right now that was designed by some college professors that is attempting to deal with just this issue. And so, I'm going to have to look and see if my assistant can come up with the name of the person that we were in contact with, but I'll make sure to get that to Jessica Oriens and to Rich. So there is a person at White Station High School and a program that they're trying to put together. Let me say this because I think it's critically important. This is an example of exactly what I was just talking about. Just how ashamed of your history do you have to be in order to try and erase it? And if you wonder whether knowing this history would have an impact on people, liberal and conservative, Republican and Democrat, doesn't matter. If you wonder whether this information would have an impact on people, look at how hard certain folks are working to stop it from getting out. So the two things I have to say is, number one, any country, and go back in history and start looking, any country that tries to maintain its national narrative by burning books, either that movement, burning books or banning books, either that movement has failed or that country has failed. That's number one. Number two is, I don't know about y'all, but the last time I saw a teenager, the quickest way to get them to read something is to tell them that they can't read it. I don't know what these folks think they're doing with these laws, but it's like, have you ever dealt with a teenager before? And as Sarah Kunstler, one of the directors, says, classrooms are not the only place where youth of our country learn. One of the things that the Who We Are Project is going to do, and I will tell you that when we came and screened the film in Memphis, we had great conversations with the folks at the Crosstown Arts Theater. And since we are both 501c3 organizations, I think we can get that theater for free. One of the things the Who We Are Project is doing is developing programs where we will go into states that have these laws, and we will contact student organizations, teacher organizations, parent organizations, and offer a day or a week or a weekend, whatever it might be, of learning, where we show this film. We show original source documents, like the letters that Thomas Jefferson wrote when he talked about what enslaving people meant. The letters that James Madison, the father of our country, wrote when he was talking about whether the Constitution was going to protect the institution of slavery. We will give them this information and not tell them this proves this or that. We're going to say, what does it look like to you, and have those discussions. So the Who We Are Project has education and education of our youth as one of our major goals. We will be one organization that will be looking to help, and specifically in Memphis, so that, and I'm saying that we are interested in helping our youth, because in states that don't have those kind of laws, we're going to be working with those teachers and those schools to get the film and study guides that we've developed for the film into schools to help teachers in the classes that they're already teaching, not to take them over, but as a supplement. But in the states that have the anti-CRT laws, we'll be helping other folks oppose those laws, but we're going right for the people that matter. We're going for the youth and their parents and their teachers. And if we get people in the Crosstown Arts Theater 3 days in a row, it doesn't matter what they're going to be teaching or what they're trying to do with these laws, because you can't prevent this information from impacting people.
There are a couple of questions online I want to get to. But first, a comment from Gil or Jill Scott. They're over in the UK, and they were very happy to find your documentary available now on Google Play in the usual resources like Netflix or Amazon Prime. He wasn't able, or they weren't able to find it, but just recently they've been able to view it on Google Play in the UK. So for those who are over there, you can go there. I'm going to go to this question first because along the same lines of teaching, what impact do you think this legislation or legislation banning the teaching of CRT will have on the long-term future of America? You kind of answered that in a sense in what you just said, but any further thoughts on that?
I think these laws are doomed, and I think many of them will be challenged, and I think they won't achieve what they're trying to achieve. And I think, you know, for any debate, I would love to debate anybody on this topic. And the first question is, should we tell our children the truth about our history? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, it's game, set, match. Because that's all I'm talking about is the truth about our history. It's not all of our history. And see, people are saying, oh, you're bringing this up and that's hurting people. I'm sorry, I wasn't the one who suppressed this information. I wasn't the one who said, let's take this information and hide it. This information has been hiding in plain sight, but none of us were taught this information. And that's the thing. This information was stolen from all of us, white Americans and Black Americans. And so it is on all of us to reckon with it and to get this information back, which is why I think it's so important that this film was a partnership between white Americans and Black Americans. Sarah and Emily Kunstler are white Jewish Americans, and I'm a Black American. And yet we made a partnership to make this film where they were saying to me, we don't want to control what you say. We just want to get it on film so people can see it and then reckon with it. And so I think that's just an important aspect of all of this that we're talking about. And Rich, I think I've got time for maybe one more question. I'm sorry, I've got some things backing up against each other here.
All right, well, we do have one more. Well, we have a question and a longer statement in our virtual community. Karen Brennan asked, do you have suggestions for those who are working for reparations?
Yes, I think the issue of reparations, and that is HR 40, it's a bill before Congress that would establish a commission to investigate the issue of reparations for slavery and the vestiges of slavery that continued after 1865. And then to make recommendations to Congress for reparatory legislation. I would say that the Biden administration and the whole political apparatus is gearing up for midterm elections. And so it may be difficult to get people's attention, but I think still talking to people and pushing this issue with elected representatives is important. And this is another thing where it's like, oh, I didn't know that. I think most people know that the United States paid $1.6 billion in reparations to Japanese Americans for 3.5 years of imprisonment during World War II. And that $1.6 billion didn't come close to compensating them for everything that they lost, but it was an attempt to reckon with what was done. And many people say, well, that's the only experience America has ever had with reparations. But once again, that's not true. Everybody has heard of the Emancipation Proclamation when Lincoln freed the slaves. But one of the things I learned in my 50s was about the Compensated Emancipation Act that Lincoln got passed 9 months before the Emancipation Proclamation, because he knew that if he was freeing enslaved people in the Washington, D.C. area, some of the owners might get upset. So he set up a commission and he paid $1 million in 1861 money to Washington, D.C. slave owners for lost property when their enslaved people were freed, just those who lived in the DC area. So when we say and talk about reparations, part of it in knowing our history is that, well, we've already paid reparations for slavery we paid it to slave owners. And so I think continued discussion and, quite frankly, continued education about what our past really looked like is what I think can bring people to a different view about what we should do going forward.
Thank you. That was the last one. I don't know if you actually still have time for one more. But we definitely appreciate you coming, Attorney Robinson. Thank you so much for your work. We look forward to a continued conversation with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't thank y'all enough for the work that you're doing. And, you know, Rich and Jessica, thank you so much for connecting me with this organization. We will definitely be in touch going forward. And I congratulate you on the work that you're doing. Thank you all so much. And please enjoy getting back together again for what it seems like is the first time in a long time.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Wow. What do you guys think? Well, let me go through the agenda real quick of what is left, what's coming up. So I think we should like kind of process what we just heard for a few minutes. And then we are going to talk with some members, some participants in our LSP book club about the things that they're doing. And then we just have some LSP announcements, some of the activities that LSP is doing as an organization. And then we'll conclude. So, well, let me ask this. You don't have to do this virtually, but if anyone has to use the bathroom, use a break like that. Okay. So who wants to go first? Yes.
Declaration of Independence is all men are created equal. How have they gotten away from that?
The Declaration of Independence is
All men are created equal.
all men are created equal.
Now, how have they gotten away with that and the way they treated African Americans, Japanese, or whoever?
Right.
How is that?
Right. The question was, you know, we have the Declaration of Independence, which starts with all men are created equal, and yet our country has not treated all men equally. How did we get away with that? Anyone have a response to that?
Yes.
Let me ask one of our new.
Well, I think that was a new concept to this country. When they came over here, they came from kings and queens. So they're equal stuff, that everybody was gonna be the same, not having a king. I think
but it's
treat everybody equally.
Yeah, the dehumanization is what he said. Women, black men, black women, Indian, you know, anything other than white Anglo-Saxon male were who that was written about, landowners. So that's who that was written for. Everybody else had to fight for whatever bit and piece they could get.
I also think it was justified by science. And Dr. Kendi has a lot of really interesting parts of his book that Mr. Robinson talked about, Stand from the Beginning. That's one of the best books, Stand from the Beginning, Stand from the Beginning. And so this became, they were able to justify it because they had proved that there were differences in the race.
They paid a lot of people to prove that. Johann Blumenbach,
yes.
You know, never left Austria, but someone sent him skulls from all over the world. Oh, probably one of those trading companies that paid him. Okay. sent him skulls and he discerned the differences of the races by skull, just skulls. He got never seeing the people. So yeah, they paid for those science studies and ran with that bad knowledge.
I do want to read a comment that came in from a friend, Sutton Williams. This is not a question. I just want Mr. Robinson to know, and I'm sorry, Ms. Sutton Williams, I was not able to get to this while he was here, but they are attempting on his behalf. Many of you are aware of the amazing anti-racism work of lawyer Jeffery Robinson. If you aren't, one of the most impactful talks, The Truth About the Confederacy in the United States, can be seen for free on YouTube, okay? I've been following Mr. Robinson's work for 3 years, and over that time, I've become convinced that what he's doing, educating the country about the truth of racism, has made him a national treasure. As Venetia Bailey, a friend and member of the anti-racism organization Coming to the Table, put it, I believe Jeffery Robinson's research and body of work is a notable achievement and has an invaluable impact on American history/society that deserves to be honored. For that reason, they've created a petition to ask President Biden to nominate Mr. Robinson for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And they are asking those of you who are interested to sign and share. We have a link here, which we'll check out first. And we'll see. For those who don't know, I'm an intellectual property attorney, so I tend to be a little bit cautious. But thank you, Fran, for sending that.
We okay with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Rich?
Yes.
Who did you say asked the question about reparations?
Oh, it's here.
Was it Brandon? Karen, or was it Karen Brandon?
Karen Brandon.
It was Karen Brandon?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my relative.
And it wasn't coming to the table part of it?
Yeah, that's my possible white
To
relative.
the table. Awesome.
Yeah, Karen Brandon.
She's spoken to us.
She's
last
not
year. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
That's my possible white relative.
Hello, Karen.
All right. And we are now at 7 o'clock, and at the time of which we were going to transition to a brief talk on our book club that we have here at LSP. And I'm going to invite Steve Strain up, and either, I don't know if you want to introduce those who want to talk, or because we have some panelists here who are going to talk about it as well. We're going to talk for like 10-15 minutes about what you guys are doing.
Was that you were going to ask questions, and I guess whoever
we can do that.
We've got several people here, and whoever is best to answer a question can answer it.
All right, good. I don't know if you want to do a little spiel or anything like that before. Okay.
I brought the book, but I don't.
Okay.
I'm not good at spiels.
Okay. Well, LSP has started a book club. When would you say it started, Steve? I'll start the conversation with you.
July of last year.
July of last year, we started, and they are reading My Grandmother's Hands. My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem.
Racialized trauma and the pathway to mending our hearts and bodies.
And we have
backwards. Okay.
We have a couple of people who are involved in the book club to talk about it. If you guys don't mind, you can take yourselves off of mute and introduce yourselves. I'll start what's going on from my left to right. Francine Madry, if you don't mind introducing yourself and telling us where you're calling in from.
Hi, I'm Francine Madry, and I am in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm a retired educator, Winston-Salem State University, a historically Black institution here in Winston-Salem. I'm originally from Tennessee, about 45 miles east of Memphis. Haywood County, or is it west of Memphis? Yeah, east of Memphis, Haywood County. So.
One of our favorite Haywood County residents, John Ashworth, is not here with
right
us.
Here. Yeah. I know John, yes.
Thank you so much, Francine. Next, we have Karen Case.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. I'm Karen Case. I live in Somerville, Massachusetts, in the Boston area. I am a huge fan of LSP and delighted to be part of this book group. I'm also a retired United Church of Christ pastor.
Thank you so much, Karen. And we have a very own and favorite, Susan Penn. How are you?
Hi, Rich.
Hey.
I'm from Memphis. I was part of the part of the committee that was working on the duplicate line part of LSP. I've been to a number of LSP's events, but 5 o'clock on Monday was never good for me. So I joined the book club in order to get to know some of the people that are more involved in LSP Memphis.
And I'm actually going to start with you, Susan, and work my way back. You started going to the book club because Mondays at 5 were tough for you, tough for a number of us. Hence why we pushed you back. But what would you say is the main thing you get from being a part of the book club?
Well, you go inward, and there is a chance to speak your truth, speak what you wonder about, speak what upsets you in an environment that is where we have developed trust among ourselves, and it's just a growing edge for me, and I think for a lot of people in the group.
What about you, Karen? How did you hear about the group, and what is it that you get from it?
I heard about it because I have been paying attention to LSP things over the years. And when you all went online because of the pandemic, I was able to start joining you on Monday nights, which were good for me. So my grandmother's hands, Resmaa Menakem's work is just this completely eyes open look at racialized trauma. So like in the context of what we were just talking about, it really tells some important truths about how trauma and race have played out in our bodies and our psyches and our lives through US history, going all the way back to other continents and other centuries. And it's an opportunity to listen deeply to other people's truths and to pay attention to my own truth as it arises in my physical body. That's it.
So, hey, Francine, and yourself, how did you join the group, and what do you get out of it?
Well, I was first introduced to LSP by John Ashworth, the work that he's done, and the fact that his family's from Haywood County, and he was actually president of our former only Black high school in Brownsville, Tennessee. He was president of one of our alumni groups, and so I became acquainted with his work, and was particularly interested because at the time I joined, there was a conversation about Elbert Williams, who was lynched in Brownsville. And as it turns out, I was actually a classmate of his nephew. Didn't know that until a class reunion a few years ago. But all my life, I never heard anything about Elbert Williams. And so I was very curious and wanted to join the discussion. The nights didn't work out well for me, but then I was finally able to be free on Wednesday evenings. You refer to us as a book club. We don't call ourselves that. I'm not sure what we are, but we say we're not a book club because here we are, 8 months down the road, and we're not even halfway through the book. So we use our Monday for me. And I'll just be honest, in the beginning, I felt sort of hesitant to be another part of a group, having to talk about my experiences and have others say, that they were sorry that had happened to me, and me feeling that that's not what I need, But I stayed with the group, and what I have found is that it is a safe place for us to talk, to express our concerns, our views, our trauma. And for me, I've really looked at this book in terms of my own experiences, you know, with my father dying at age 50 of a heart attack and so many other problems, just because there in Haywood County, he was fighting so hard for justice, and constant attacks throughout our community, people's houses being burned, people being just coming up missing and things like that. And I began to see in reading this book that much of what we just thought were bad things happening, he really internalized those. And I feel in many ways that they were responsible for his early death and for the deaths of so many others in that area who were victimized by this, you know, with the not being able to go to grocery stores and buy things because they had dared to register to vote, being put off their property, you know, by landowners because they dared to go and register and vote. And so the book has meant a lot to me, and I'm beginning to examine my own, I say, hyperactivity sometimes when I read things and I get so agitated and so upset because it's so real to me. And having to learn all of this, so much of this now, never taught to us, and just having to discover it now, but in a safe group with others. So we have gender, ethnicity, geographical diversity. And so we're able to talk and say what we want to say and have people refute it. We can argue about it if we want to, but we leave respecting each other's place and growing from those experiences. So I've used more than all my time. So thank you.
And we probably should have started with this. You touched on it, Francine, the structure of the group. It's not, we're calling it a book club in name only. I know it started that way. And I know if you know, whether it's you, Steve, or you, Sammy, want to talk about, I guess, the structure of a meeting. What do you guys like begin with? Steve is giving me a bit of a preview of it, but
we're anything but a book club.
Okay.
And there is no structure.
There's no structure, but there is some structure for those that need structure. I know some people just can't be happy with them.
You had a question in the back there. Were you done, Sammy? Or I think you were thinking. I think Sammy was thinking. Oh, great. You want to yield, Sammy? And
yes.
Oh, yeah, please.
Well, in regard to the structure, we start together, and we've started doing a little checking, which we weren't doing. We've gotten to know each other better through checking. And then Steve facilitates, and we actually have the book, which is read by the author. And we just start listening to the book. And the chapters, or the parts of the chapters, are divided by stars. So when we reach a star, we stop and just share what has come up for us in our bodies. The sensations, the feelings, the emotions. And then a lot of times there'll be some silence because it's so powerful. We really don't have the words to speak. And then when we feel like everybody is ready to move on, we just move on to the next reading and listen. So some nights we might get through a page. 3 to 4 pages, and then the author has exercises throughout the book. They're very powerful, and most of them have to do with body work. And so a couple of times we've done the body work in the group, have taken, you know, a quiet time to do that. We've begun more and more to say that we'll do body work in our own time. And then if we want to bring something out of that body work, body work meaning sitting with our sensations, our emotions. Sometimes it has to talk to a distant ancestor, to invite them into community. I would call it a sacred struggle. And I've been deeply changed by it, and I appreciate the honesty that she.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know, Pan, you had your hand up. Would you like to share about your experience? Or
I did not have a
Oh.
I could not possibly be more eloquent than those who have already spoken, but I do call it a sacred.
Thank you, Francine, Karen, and Susan for sharing. One of the things that Steve really stressed to me, and as well as Sammy, I've been speaking with both of those guys, is the safe space aspect you guys have created there amongst yourselves. And that's something we need as a wider community to talk about what we need to talk about to heal. And I thank you guys for your work in doing this. It's just that you're doing things, you're doing pop-ups.
Yeah, well, my judgment, we are dealing with one subject that will wreck your spiritual, mental, and emotional self, as well as your physical self. Race has left an ugly mark on this country. And I know there's a scar in me. I don't know about you. I can't speak for you. You can tell. But I know there's a scar that needs healing in me. I can't talk to it. We talk about doing the courageous conversation. And some days I don't feel that courageous. I'm just angry, or sad. And still I have to go. So to do what we say we want to do, we need, in my judgment, is to start putting healing in this message as well as education and.
It's about love. You need to know your love.
I need to know I am some days, because race has told me some days that I'm not even. All right, we know that. But I'm saying, going to someone who hasn't begun to make that distinction and telling them something that they don't want to hear, maybe, black or white, I got to be ready and be able to transfer that message.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sorry, I was going to move on to the next thing, but what you said made me think of a part in the documentary where he was talking with the gentleman, I think they were in South Carolina, outside the statue, and engaged the man and why he felt, how he felt. I think he said that the slavery wasn't a part of the Civil War, it was all about money, yada, yada, yada. And that's what he believed. And I think on the bus ride back, Attorney Robinson was saying that he doesn't agree with them. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of, what he believes is not necessarily true. And we may not be able to reach him, but if we don't try, then no one will ever reach him. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you just made me think of that piece of what you just said. So, thanks again for sharing. So, what has LSP been up to since we last were physically together? And those of you who have been a part of our community do know, but this is just a way to get things updated. One, L Persons, the L Persons lynching site, the murder of L Persons, really one of the things that really brought this organization together at its creation. We have been working on ways to further develop that site. We have helped Representative Steve Cohen write a letter to President Biden, which he has sent, to get the L Persons lynching site admitted into the National Park Service. So he has done that. And the mechanism by which he can do that is through the Antiquities Act. Okay. And that process will take a couple of years, we believe, but we have started the process. As far as we know, it will be the first, and up to this point only, space that would have been a lynching site that would be a part of the National Park Service. Steve?
I think there had to be a hearing from the Shelby County Conservation Board before this went forward. Did that already happen?
Yeah, all of that has already happened.
Right.
So, awesome. A part of that, we have a number of things surrounding L Persons. One, to help build knowledge about what happened to L Persons is we have a group of people who are planning a symposium around the lynching of L Persons. And we are still putting together that agenda. We're thinking it'll be just one day of 4 panel discussions and interviews over the course of a day about the L Persons lynching, the facts of the case, if you will, the role of the press, how it has affected us today, and hearing from the descendants. As some of you know, we have been in touch and we do know the descendants of L Persons, descendant of one of the police officers who let the mob get L Persons, and one of the descendants of the supposed victim, the little white girl who was murdered at the time. So we are all working on that for later on in the year to have this symposium. So we are very, 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 very excited about that. We do plan a memorial service. I'm gonna look at 2 people to do it. Margaret, I was hoping you could just say a little bit about what we're thinking for the memorial for L Persons coming up in May. And Laura Fevere, just after her, I was hoping you could talk just a bit about the good news that we shared last week and what it's going to be used for. Okay, all right. Margaret, and if you could come up here, just so people here on the virtual can at least hear you. I know you may want to not be on camera. We can still focus on that. But
yeah, we're planning to have a gathering at the site of the L Persons lynching on Sunday, May 22nd this year. We have had a small committee working on this, and our plans are still somewhat in the flux. And help me out here. But I think what we have decided on is making this basically a gathering of LSP members and supporters, rather than trying to do a large amount of outreach to the larger community, just because of the time struggles at this point. But this commemoration in May will be part of building toward the symposium that Rich was talking about, which will probably happen in the fall. And both are part of our ongoing efforts to bring more attention to the case and to gain community support for the attempt to get it admitted to the National Park Service. So there'll be more information about that soon, but it will be on Sunday, May 22nd.
all right. Thank you, Margaret Vandiver. Laura. Yeah, just a bit so the people who are virtual can hear you.
So
LSP recently was awarded a $25,000 grant. Very exciting. It's part of the National Trust. I'm going to get the rest of their name wrong. National Trust Preservation something national. And the conversation for what this grant is going to be used for actually started last year in our education committee, talking about ways that we can connect more people with historic sites of racial injustice in Memphis, and thinking of ways to do that, creatively. And the idea came up of an app to be able to, for people, if they want to go out to a site, have the research and information that they need to be able to understand the significance of where they are, and if they want to take a driving tour, that sort of thing. Because there are times where we as an organization can do those guided tours, but we are small. So being able to have an app can be really great with that. And so we started conversations with Code Crew, which you may know of. They're an organization here in Memphis, and they focus on bringing more technology training for folks to be able to enter into the technological field and code. And so together with them, we're going to be creating this app. And what is, I think, really special about it too is that it will be incorporating some augmented reality within that. Code Crew did a similar thing with St. Jude Children's Hospital. They had their artwork, like on the patient's artwork on a wall, and if you came up to the wall with your app, your camera would recognize it, and it would kind of come to life. And it was something that just kind of made that artwork come to life through augmented reality. And so we're hoping to apply that same concept to this app to be able, once you are there at the site, some certain narrations or maybe interviews with descendants that we know of, in different other kind of media to be able for people to view while they're at the site. So for the next year, we're going to be working on that. So stay tuned for information about that if you want to get involved. And yeah, that's what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And lastly, something that's been ongoing, which many of you already know about, is the podcast that we have, which you can find on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. The Red Record podcast. I don't know if it's LSP Red Record or Red Record LSP. We finished our first season back in the beginning of January, and look forward to the second season later on this year. And that is all we have for an agenda. We have a question in the back. Attorney Aluko.
I was wondering if the NAACP partnered with LSP on the L person historical marker. Where we put it was designed to be a temporary space until the development of, I guess, the Green Line had extended to the area where the lynching actually occurred. So I'm wondering, where are we on that? Because at the time we thought it might be a 2 or 3 year process. And I guess 5 years now. So I'm just wondering, where are we on moving it to the actual?
I'm going to call on Margaret to address that. And I'm sorry for people who are online who are not able to hear that question, but it related to the work that was started with the NAACP in moving the L person, well, having a more permanent home of the marker for the L person's lynching, which is right now on the side of a major road, to where it actually happened. And that involved some work with the Wolf River Conservatory and what they were going to build out. And I know that COVID kind of interrupted everything, but we're going to ask Margaret Vanderburg to give us an update on where that is. We do have one update. Thank you, Randy, for reminding me. We started I guess it was last summer, really. We started a quilt project, which I think some of you know about, but we haven't given an update in a while. But Randy, please give us an update.
And I know I ain't gonna take too long. Okay. But anyway, you know, I've been involved in all things since the beginning. But here's an article that came out on February 21st, 2016. It's called Social Justice Stands Out in Quilts by Modern Quilters. And it says racial inequality, violence inspire new design. For some reason, I kept this article for a reason. Because when I'm looking around, I'm looking at these big old, this display right here. And for some reason, you know, I've been thinking a long time ago about a quilt. It kind of germinated in my mind. But to make a long story short, whoever it is, right, there's three things that we're working on. Because I'm hearing about descendants. We know, you know, there's 37 lynching, probably a lot more than that, or wherever it is, right? But we know there's 25 cases. We're working, I'm fortunate, LSP is fortunate to have several people on the committee. One lady was down here, her name Catherine Butler. She lives in New Hampshire, whoever it is, right? She's working with Margaret around documentation, you know, archives and stuff like that. I'm doing pretty much a lot of the research, and I'm grateful because there was a lady that Margaret put me in touch with. She knew Margaret 18 years ago. She is a descendant of one of the Kerrville Six, and she knows some of all the other families. Kerrville is up in going towards Millington and stuff like that, so that's a blessing. She actually participated in one of our meetings that we had. And the other thing is trying to find descendants. That's going to take some time. I know Jessica had someone called her, or either called or emailed you. I don't know how it happened or whatever it is, right? But he was the great grandnephew of Thomas Moss, named Henry Moss. I'm still waiting to hear from him. And so, you know, it's going to take a while. We're looking at the 7 unknown, you know, there's no information, so to speak, whatever it is, right? We submitted a packet to Rich or whatever it is, right? Because we can kind of get started. We know the ones like Michelle Whitney, you know, L person, you know, descendant, and Cynthia Myers for Justin Lee Bond and stuff like that. It's going to take a while to kind of create this quilt. But to me, it's more than just the physicalness of the textile or the art. It's really about hearing about the stories of the descendants. That's key. And I wanted to make sure that we had their perspective to hear their stories. Also had the participation, because to me, it doesn't do any good to actually create something where you don't create it for the people who lost one. That's it.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Randy. All right, and that's all we have. I just want to say I'm so happy to see everybody. Everyone online, thank you again for joining us this evening. We look forward to touching base with you next month as Steve waves bye-bye. Good night, good evening, good morning to those across the pond. So again, we look forward to seeing you guys next month. Bye-bye. Thank you.